On October 25th, we're coming back to Melbourne for our first physical MLOps event. Whether you are just starting in the MLOps journey, improving in that space, or whether you have thousands of models in production, this event is for you. The type of things we're going to cover is MLOps for scale, and that scale can be number of models or the number of people in the team, or the number of prediction and inferences that need to be made in an hour or a minute or a second. So how to create effective MLOps for all those scenarios. We're going to cover MLOps processes and team structures. How do we organize ourselves and the talent that we have in our organizations for better results in MLOps? We're going to be looking at creating efficient and effective MLOps pipelines in an end-to-end. What does the data look like, the feature stores, all the way to the model deployment, serving, monitoring, alerting, etc. We're also going to cover getting a C-level buy-in and support for the investment in this area. We're going to be covering what governance and good management looks like in this space. So wherever you are in your journey, the MLOps event in Melbourne on October 25th is going to help you increase the maturity of MLOps in your organization. I hope you can join us. See you then.
I'd like to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Talent Insights. Talent Insights are Australia's leading specialist data recruitment business. With offices in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, they're experts at providing recruitment strategy and building data teams for clients across industries Australia-wide. They provide recruitment solutions for all roles across the data lifecycle, including data engineering, data science, advanced analytics, customer and marketing insights, business intelligence, data product managers, and data governance. They're skilled at finding the best permanent and contract hires for your business needs, as well as statement of work, project focus, data resources. At Talent Insights, relationships matter most. I can say from first-hand experience, Talent Insights are fantastic to work with. Whether you're a business leader within an HR network or a specialist data candidate, Talent Insights should be the first company you turn to for all your data recruitment needs. Find them at talentinsights.com.au.
Hi, this is Felipe Flores. Welcome to Data Futurology. Today, we have a super special episode. We're going to be diving deep into data engineering, into what it can do, where it came from, where it's going, and how organizations can progress their journey leveraging this area of technology, of the data space, and how transformational it is. So I hope you enjoy it. We have joining us Richard Glew, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Aginic. Rich, how are you going today?
Really well, thanks, Felipe.
And we have Nat Dronova. She's the data engineer at Aginic. How are you doing, Nat?
Good. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us about data engineering in the space. Before we jump in, can I get you guys to introduce yourselves, tell us about your role and your remit at the moment? We can start with you, Rich, and then go to Nat.
Sure, sounds good. So I'm CTO at Aginic. Essentially, that means that I am responsible for kind of building the kind of team that we want to have at Aginic, which is actually pretty topical for today's talk. I do a little bit of this sort of thing and also sort of help support our business guys talking to execs. Just a lot of the work we do is very transformational. So it's kind of sort of trying to convince people that there are better ways is a big part of what I do.
Yeah, good man. And man, you've had an awesome background by, being CTO before. You've also been pretty high up at Coles and ThoughtWorks. Give us a 30-second on that side of your experience.
Yeah, sure. So, I've always actually started my career in data. I started in Australia, but I wasn't here for very long in the beginning. Did a long stint at Disney, working in sort of global teams, both in sort of more in the application space and data, and got into all the agile and all that sort of stuff. Came back to Australia, and I was a CTO of another startup up in Queensland, and then was a principal tech at ThoughtWorks for a few years, and then took on head of data at Coles, where we launched the sort of first big cloud data platform for them, which was ambitious, I would say, but ultimately we did get there.
Yeah, amazing. And now, how long with Aginic? About 2 years?
Just over a year, actually. So it's coming up to 18 months at the end of the year.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, that's great. Thanks, mate. And Nat, how about yourself? Can you tell us a little bit about your background and your role?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a data engineer at Aginic. I started out as a data analyst at the very top of the BI stack, and then slowly moved backwards, worked in the sweet middle, and now I'm kind of doing more of a data engineering sort of things. And I've been with Aginic for around 4 years. So that was quite a transformation to go from data analytics to the data engineering space.
Yeah, in a short amount of time. How beneficial do you see it having that experience as an analyst, as you said, in the top of the stack? How valuable has that been as you've been going deeper into the stack?
I think it kind of helps you talk with the business because you know what they're looking for because you've worked with them more closely before. Mm-hmm. So that helps a lot, and you understand better what kind of data they need, what are their requirements, things like that. So it's easier for you to translate their business requirements into more technical requirements.
Yeah, very nice. And do you see, do you recommend people to move throughout the stack in their career? And if so, do you have an order preference? Understanding that there might be some bias there, but I think it's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sure. I think it kind of makes sense to start with the very top and then move to the bottom, because there are not that many degrees that will land you in the data engineering space. So wherever you start, you have to do a lot of self-learning and like do lots of projects, kind of catch up with the data space. So it makes sense to start at the very, very top in the analytics space and then move slowly backwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I can see a lot of benefits from understanding business requirements and dealing with stakeholders, and also the data structures that are going to enable analysis and being able to contribute to those discussions as well. Because I can see sometimes data engineers coming into the field, they want kind of more prescriptive data structures as a target, and it helps create those interfaces, but having the knowledge from the other side definitely helps speed things up. So with that, I might switch over to you, Rich, and I wanted to ask you if you can give us a bit of a overview of data engineering, where you see it, where's it at the moment. We can start there and then discuss where it's going and the difference it can make. But let's start with where is it at the moment? How do we get here?
It's a good question. So I think, the way I'll probably answer it is a little bit roundabout, but I think for me, I mean, I sort of mentioned earlier that I started my career in data, doing a bunch of BI. This is early days at Disney, and actually back at my very first job was actually at Ozpost as a consultant, way back when, doing BI stuff and a mix of sort of back end development as well. But I kind of left that space, worked very heavily in sort of app development for a long time. Went through the whole journey of moving to the cloud and distributed computing and microservices and Kubernetes and all the things basically that we kind of see as pretty standard today. And then coming back into data maybe 5 years ago now, been kind of shocked that that essentially nothing had changed since basically the late 90s. It's still exactly the same, and I found that pretty horrifying. Started to see some stats around the percentage of projects that actually succeed in the data space. Like when you're suddenly responsible for building a large platform, you start to wonder about well, is this going to work? Like, who else has done this? And then you start to find out that actually most of them fail, which doesn't exactly fill you with confidence. But then when you look at why they fail and kind of what the state of the data engineers is, you realize that, well, actually it's maybe not that surprising, because we used to have that problem in software as well. Back in the days when we had, the more waterfall style projects with testing at the end and all of this sort of heavy kind of legacy ways of doing things is still kind of the way most data projects work at enterprises. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the case everywhere. I mean, and I guess we're going to talk a little bit more about, what the future can look like and what we're already seeing in some places, because there's actually a number of companies that are already working in the future as far as everyone else is concerned. But yeah, look, I think getting back to it, we've essentially become reliant on big data tool providers to sort of provide us with sort of low and no code solutions. I think that's largely as a sort of response to the fact that there just aren't any engineers in the data space. Typically, you can't find people to build it in a different way. So you're relying on kind of the dream of being able to have a tool do most of the work for us. But the reality, of course, is that never really comes true. There's just way too much complexity in what we're trying to do. Also, I think what makes it a bit harder is that unlike maybe a pure app space, what we call the business, which is another whole problem on it, the fact that we have that distinction at all. But the business guys generally have a lot more to do with data than they do in a software project. And so while that sort of dysfunction exists between those kind of parts of organizations, which it inevitably does in every large organization, then I think it's kind of inevitable that you end up with sort of a pretty dysfunctional sort of environment, and people aren't working together in the right ways. We don't have the right tools. We don't have the right mindset. And so that's kind of what I'm passionate about trying to change.
Nice. And tell me a bit more about the distinction between, a tech and business or delivery and the stakeholders.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a consultant, I've been sort of in a consultancy, not that much in my career. More I've been on the other side in the actual in the IT teams, typically of big enterprises. But yeah, I think it's if there is an IT team and somebody's using the term the business, then you already know you're in trouble pretty much. Because modern sort of companies that really harness their technology well don't have that distinction. Or if they do have an IT team, they're the guys that are doing things like Salesforce or your email and Outlook and Exchange and things in the background. They're not talking about operational business systems. Whereas, most of these most enterprises that we work with today, in fact, all of them, I would say, have got, they entrust, the technical operations of actual business things to a completely different department that they don't have anything really to do with. And their relationship's usually pretty toxic. They complain about what they get, how slow and expensive and bad everything is. And if you go to the IT side, they complain about how the business never knows what they want and they change their mind every 5 seconds. Whereas companies that are more in that digital native space that have grown up in the cloud don't tend to have that distinction. And as a result, their business people are a lot more technical. Often they're engineering led anyway. And as a result, they've kind of managed to erase that sort of artificial boundary. And as a result, they're just a lot more collaborative and a lot more productive, and they can actually make decisions that make sense, because like it or not, in the digital world, technology is a huge part of your actual business these days, whether you kind of want to think of it or not.
And are there any key differences that you see between the organizations that have the distinction of, the business and the delivery teams and the ones that don't? Are there, for example, structural differences that make
night and day? Yeah, absolutely. Typically they tend to be a lot more product focused, even if they're not necessarily making a product. They're just the way they sort of orient. They're much more in that sort of building the idea of, we've talked about in Agile having cross-functional teams for a long time, but, we still kind of, a lot of people still think that means, cross-functional in the sense of, we have, developers and testers and QA people. It's like, well, actually, no, you need the business people in that team as well, right? And the better you are at doing that, the more productive you can be. And there's a handful of companies around that I know personally that have kind of transformed from A to B. Like most of them start that way, if you like. They start joined up and they've never had the other experience. But I know, for example, from prior lives, that REA is one example in Australia that actually shifted from a central IT team to a sort of more integrated team, and that was, I think, a large reason for their sort of success in the early days.
Nice. Yeah, that's really good. Good to know. Thanks. And Nat, from your perspective, how have you seen the role change, evolve, and where do you see it going?
I guess over the years, I've noticed that first it was UI first tools that you would be using. It would be drag and drop and things like that. precisely because business users would want to be able to use that. So they would not rely too much on the data engineering people, data analysts and stuff like that. But now I feel like they're understanding more and more that they need proper engineering practices in place. So that's where we come in, and that's how they're more they like more working with us, I feel like. So yeah, I guess that's one of the things I've noticed. We are more software engineering focused, so we work less with the business and work more in the engineering space, and that's why we are getting more and more software engineering practices in our workflow. Which practices, it kind of depends on the client and on the project that you're working on. Some of them are just happy using like version control, things like that. Others are more sophisticated in their approaches, but there is still quite a lot of stuff that we can be doing differently, I guess.
Yes, definitely. And as the role evolves, and I guess the discipline matures, do you think that there'll be parts of data engineering that will become a solved problem, or will we get to a point where we have enough or too many data engineers, where today they're a hot commodity, and the problems that data engineers are solving are pain points for almost every business? Will we get to a point where we feel like as a market, we feel like that we have enough data engineers, and that there's parts of data engineering problems that are problems today, but that will be solved problems in the future?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good question, actually. So I think the short term, no, we're in trouble, to be honest. Or if we're a data engineer, it's awesome because we've got lots of people fighting over us. But yeah, look, I think eventually it will. I mean, I think we've sort of seen. I mean, again, I sort of look at this sort of growth curve along the lines of what happened in software. Like, remember, we're now talking 20. I think actually data is close to 20 years behind software, right? In terms of this sort of thing, and we're now at a point where being a software engineer is cool. There's Netflix shows about it. When I started out, it was like it was pretty much not that wasn't a cool job, put it that way. And being in data was probably extremely uncool.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of changing. And I think there's a lot of interest from people in software engineering, especially even just the basic thing that salaries are typically like 30% higher, in data engineering than they are in software engineering. And so I think that will attract more and more people in, but I still think it's going to take a long time because all of the reasons that kind of held software back, we're exploring. We're actually in a really interesting part. I think this is the best news about the state of data engineering today, is that it's the best time to get into it because it's still evolving and innovating really fast, and I don't think that that's going to stop. I think to answer your question about are there some solved problems, I think absolutely we've already achieved some. The cloud has enabled essentially unlimited storage, and now with platforms like whether it's Snowflake or Databricks or even something like Starburst, unlimited kind of compute is now a thing, or at least effective unlimited compute, depending on how much money you want to spend. I think it will continue to improve, of course, but I think if you look back maybe even 5 years ago, that was still a really hard problem to solve. Now it's kind of trivial, but I think we're now facing into some more the next sort of layer of gnarly problems, which are really around data management. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about governance later potentially, but so that's certainly an area that's got a lot of focus at the moment. But then I think there's also the whole cultural part between I often sort of talk to people and say, well, we can build these amazing answer machines, right? But if you don't know what questions to ask it and you can't understand what it tells you, then what's the point? So I think on the analytics side of the house, with our business users or with the people that need to be working in the business, they also need to go on a sort of an equivalent journey of maturity as well.
Yeah, I agree. That's ace. And yeah, we'll come back to the data management discussion around current challenges and where with that area is at. But first, maybe we can quickly go through some use cases, some of the applications that you guys have worked on, journeys on how those projects or solving those problems happened, and anything you can share with us from that perspective. Might throw it over to Nat to kick us off.
Sure. So some of the use cases of us implementing the data platforms.
Yeah.
I guess I've got a few in mind. We recently were working with a healthcare organization that just embarked on this journey. And it was quite exciting because they had no idea where to start. But given that they were expecting a huge growth and stuff like that, they wanted to start it the right way. So they came to us and they asked for recommendations on how they can first build something that is easy to maintain right now. When they're still small, they don't have too many data sources. Their business does not yet know what the data can do for them. But at the same time, the platform that can be kind of easy to grow as the business grows, and that would be able to kind of deal with more types of data, more data sources, and more use cases and stuff like that. So, well, what we did is started building the data platform on. We can talk about the tools, right? On Databricks, and mainly that was to first allow them to have one central place for all the data, for know kind of what kind of data they're getting, know what kind of data they're getting in, and that what kind of data they're getting out. Make use of all the cloud stuff, but also not have the choice of using languages that are familiar for them, but also be able to switch later on to like a more data engineering ways of working. There are a bunch of difficulties they've encountered. The first one is kind of not having to upskill themselves from knowing not much about the data or knowing like pretty much nothing about the data to being able to manage that platform once we're gone. So within 1 year, we had the data engineering, BI team going from being able to just build the dashboards and do the analysis there to managing the whole Databricks platform with a bunch of data pipelines that are sitting outside of the Databricks, and with the like writing their own transformations, writing their own views. And pretty much taking it on board after a couple of months of setting things up. So that was quite exciting because they went from nothing to quite their own managed, to their own managed BI platform. So that's one use case that came to mind like immediately because of the progress they've made within just 1 year.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Sorry, Rich, were you gonna?
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I mean, one of the sort of common themes, because we do a lot, obviously, is that we're sort of taking people and we might be doing an evaluation, or we might be helping them with a specific problem that they have. But we have another really large client in the insurance industry who are still on-prem, but we're helping them get ready for the cloud and introducing some of these newer technologies. So one of the other One of the other technologies we commonly would work with would be something like DBT, which we think is really fantastic for taking sort of teams that have maybe been that sort of old school ELT, they're working in, data stage or SSIS or something like that, and putting all their logic in the pipes, which we again know from software world is a very bad idea. So bringing in some proper discipline, DBT being highly opinionated about how you should actually go about doing data pipelines and stuff. But I guess the point there is with the client, it's all about upskilling their team. Not so much. I mean, yes, obviously they're going to end up with better tech and with better capability, but ultimately what we're really trying to do is teach them how to fish. Teach them how to teach their data people how to actually do how to do good practice, and also teaching their kind of exec and their business people about what they should expect, in terms of quality, what a good one looks like. I think that's the biggest challenge a lot of the time, is that people, if they've never seen what good looks like, it's very hard to get there.
Yeah, that's right. They don't know what either what to shoot for or what they could be missing out on by not knowing that gap. But yeah, it's really interesting because in those examples, there's a business transformation that needs to occur or is occurring as part of the project delivery, the upskilling, moving on to new platforms. How do you see the business transformation or the digital transformation, I guess, as a broader umbrella? What are some of the issues that you see companies having in either embarking on that journey or successfully completing that journey?
The main one, I think, is when people try to bite off more than they can chew. I think it's people get excited going, oh, okay, I've seen that, I went to this talk, or I've read this book, or I've talked to my friend at a different company or whatever. And then they go, right, we're going to transform everything. And inevitably those things don't go that well, because it's probably like 100 times harder than what they think it's going to be. So that's where, look, it's very hard is the short answer to that question. Like, because you need to pick something that's, like, if you pick something that's really easy, then you'll go, oh, great, we can do it. And then you'll kind of crash onto the next thing that's actually hard because you haven't really explored all of the issues. Equally, if you pick something too gnarly, then you can kind of be discouraged early on that it will never work. So finding some use cases that are in the middle is important, that are sort of, that explore enough of the problem space. But a lot of the challenges actually revolve around structural problems, right? I mean, because we can go to a team and we can say, okay, your problem is you only release once a year, and you've got a 12-week testing cycle, and everybody hates you because it's so slow and expensive and cumbersome, right? Everything's manual, and so if you were to sort of suddenly try to click your fingers and go, right, well, we're going to fix that everywhere, there's an enormous change management problem that suddenly comes into play. And it's not about the tech, really. It's about, well, I can teach, a team of 10 people how to do something, but how do I teach 1,000 people or 10,000 people? Like, that's a completely different problem. So I think it's like, and most organizations just aren't that good at change. Like, and I'm not saying that we are particularly either. I don't think anybody is, right? That's a really hard thing to do as well. But I think if you can try to structure that change in a way that you're sort of biting off bite-sized chunks that you can actually achieve and accomplish, but still have an overarching kind of strategy and a vision of what you're trying to get to, I think that's probably the biggest key points. And also making sure that, I think companies, and I've seen this, that are committed to a long-term approach, that know it's going to take 5 or 6 years, and don't say, oh no, we're all going to be wrapped up in 18 months because I promised the board or the CEO. Those ones are more than likely not going to pan out too well.
I have something to add about the ones that are that want everything done within like 6 or 8 months, stuff like that. A lot of times they really want to cut corners when they are doing the pipelines, when they're getting data to the users. They want it now, they've promised it, and they're finding the shortcuts that are hurting them in the long run. So a few years later, when you go and look at their stack, it's all over the place. There are like 15, 20 ingestion patterns. There is not a single source of truth for the data and things like that. And even though they feel like they've made progress towards the best practices as they see it, in reality, they've just got stuck. They've taught the business and analysts and all the data people to follow their guts and follow like the practices they think are right. But in the end, it's just getting them deeper into the weeds, and it's making it much harder to move forward with the data platform. It's almost like you need to uproot everything and start from scratch.
Yes. Yes, it's so true. And often it that proliferation of different approaches happens, or sometimes it happens through individual project teams working independently, kind of like sometimes in an agile manner, that everyone tries to solve their own problem and move quickly and solve it kind of like their way. And then as that kind of happens more and more, obviously this is not the only way to get into this problem, but as that proliferation grows over time, then you do need to draw a line in the sand and take a step back and say, well, shit, we got 30 of these. We could have like 2 patterns that are reusable, and that gives us a little more standardization and easier to manage. And then you got to bite that bullet. Yeah, sorry, Nat, jump in.
No, I was going to say, and that's why it's a good idea to take the business people on the journey and actually sit them next to you and show them exactly what you are doing. So when they say, oh, why don't we take this shortcut? You show them, well, if you take this shortcut, your data will be 70% correct. And that makes them think and appreciate all the hard work that goes into building the data platform. Sorry, Chibo.
No, I was just going to say, look, I think it's a really good point, and something you said, Felipe, made me think about, like often, again, back to the transformation thing, like what makes them success is the culture of the business or the organization, right? Are you the sort of organization that is open to change, that is, I've worked at so many places that say, oh no, we encourage, you to make a mistake, we're right up until the point when you do.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, bad rating for you, you made a mistake. You're like, really? Okay. But yeah, companies that actually, or organizations that are truly embrace the sort of the idea of change is constant, and are willing to sort of try stuff out, and people in those organizations aren't clinging to their roles and what they do with like a death grip. I think, we find a lot of trouble, especially in more stagnant organizations, where we're going to make a change that's going to like literally change the roles of like lots of people, both in tech and in business. And maybe there's whole stratas that we're going to, cut out. I mean, we do those lean value stream maps, right? And you sort of go, well, you're sort of taking this big detour in the middle through all these different places to get to where you want to go. You don't have to. But of course, all the people who are on those detours don't generally like the idea that they're going to suddenly be not included anymore. And so politics is a huge factor. So, having sort of, maybe it's just awareness about it, and up front before you jump in, that you're going to encounter some resistance, and how do you actually plan for that? That's a key point too.
Yeah, I totally agree. Really good points. And that awareness at the beginning will definitely help, because then that resistance will always come, I think, or at least start with the expectation that it's coming. So get ahead of it. That's super helpful. So in the last little bit, I wanted to see if we could jump into some of the current issues where data engineering is looking to solve. We spoke before about data management being one of those areas. Could you tell us a little bit more about how those two intersect and what that world looks like at the moment?
Yeah, well, it's a topic that comes up a lot at the moment. I'm talking to a lot of clients about this. A lot of senior execs as well are starting to become aware of this, which is great. But yeah, I think as someone who used to actually own a data governance team, and sort of bash my head against the wall for a couple of years there. I'm sort of at the point now where I actually think that data governance as a concept just needs to completely die and go away.
I love it.
Purely because it doesn't work. And what I mean by that is that once upon a time, let's think about the lessons we've learned in software, right? Is that we used to have test teams, right? And where did we get our ideas that was a bad idea, right? We look back to lean manufacturing and Toyota, and the idea that we don't fix defects at the end after we've already spent all this sort of energy and cost making them and compounding them. Maybe it's a better idea to actually correct them at the start when they happen, and actually aggressively building our sort of systems and our processes around removing defects early and keeping them out and keeping things clean. But if you actually look at data, that's almost the exact opposite way that we do things, right? We just let everything trundle along. We pollute our data streams with garbage data for decades, right? And then we sort of say, then we get an audit, typically is what happens, right? These big companies, and they go, oh, how are you doing data management? Where's your PII? How do you manage this? How do you manage that? And inevitably the answer's like not very well. So somebody goes, well, we need a data governance team to sort this out. And then usually like large organizations might have, somewhere between 2 and 20 people that they assign. And, it's not even like trying to put out a bushfire with a garden hose. It's trying to put it out with a drinking straw and a glass. It's pathetically, inappropriate in terms of resourcing to solve that problem. And even if you put 1,000 people onto it, still wouldn't work because it's at the end. It's too late. All these problems have already happened. So culturally, we need to go back, right? And actually, it's not about governance. It's about management, just basic data management. How do we keep track of the things that we actually care about? Obviously we don't want to do it. You don't want to apply full-on data quality tracking for everything necessarily, because that would be really expensive without a great deal of ROI. But if you can identify the sort of key things, and even in a big organization like a Coles, there's really only about, probably in the whole organization, there's maybe only 20 or 30 data sets that you've really got to worry about keeping clean. But we don't. Or at least not in any sort of structured way. But I think what's really interesting is that there's obviously plenty of companies out there doing that really, really well. Like if you went to I've got friends that work at the FANG companies in the US and here, and the way they manage their data is just phenomenal. They know where everything is all the time, pretty much. I mean, I might be overselling it slightly, but they certainly know where their important data is, and the people who need to get access to it can get it when they need it. And as a result, all the things that, your data governance organizations are typically concerned with, like where is data, who is accessing it, is it protected, is it safe? All that stuff just drops out because you're already doing it. And you're not doing it for sort of regulatory or risk management purposes. You're doing it for commercial purposes, which is actually like 100 times more valuable to you as an organization than just being compliant, right? So I think we need to sort of, step away completely from this idea that we can somehow retrospectively fix our data, and actually focus more on keeping it clean and good in the first place, and building in those systems and processes that do it. Which is, again, if we go back to things like DBT, the fact that it's got testing in it and it's got lineage built into it. Ultimately, I still think that we need to go much further than it's not the whole answer for everything, but it's a great start. And there's a lot of innovation going on in the sort of data management tool space, which we're sort of beating the drum about with our customers, saying, hey, look, you might still be worried about storage and compute because you're asking us to help you migrate off some SQL server that's exploding in your on-prem environment, but trust us, that's not the problem that you need to worry about now. Like, we'll fix that. We'll move you to the cloud. We'll get you onto a modern platform that those issues will just vanish. But you're immediately going to hit the next series of problems, which is like, where is my data and who's got access to it? And I can share it now. Technically, I can share it. But, a real example would be HR, right? In most organizations, everybody says they want access to the HR data, but HR are never going to let you get access to it if they don't fully understand and trust what you're going to be doing with it, just because of the sensitive nature of it, right? And And even when it's not sensitive, again, getting back to that sort of politics, that like I think IT and technology teams have been a convenient excuse for a long time about why we don't share data in organizations. But I think once you sort of take those excuses away, you still find that people don't want to do it because all of a sudden, data lies less than people, right? And if you're not in control of your data, you're not necessarily in control of your narrative anymore about what your area is doing. And if you don't have those sort of universal metrics about, well, this is how we define this metric, globally, then that becomes, that's the next round of challenge, basically. It's digging into that. So I think that's a much more fruitful and productive, area to kind of spend energy on than trying to retrospectively, lock down everything and run reports on where our PI data is.
Yeah, definitely. Oh man, that's such a good approach. I love it. That's exactly what we need. So more data management, fixing it at the source, know where your data is, bring in testing, as you said. Lineage also really important.
And very heavy automation as well. I mean, that's the key, because the thing about data is, like most organizations are really limping along with a very small amount of data, because they remember they're constrained by compute and storage at the moment. The second they move to the cloud, that goes away and their problems explode 100-fold. Like now they've got data everywhere and they don't know, which is the old data swamp problem, right? So the answer isn't to go back to just structured data and data warehouses. It's actually we need something new.
Yeah, agreed, mate. That's ace. Just look at the time. I can't believe the time's gone so quickly. So I did wonder, one last thing I wanted to ask you is, where can people find out more about you guys? If they wanted to continue this discussion, if they wanted to chat about, what's happening in their organization, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, all the usual ways. I mean, aginic.com. I mean, we're now a part of the Mantle Group, which is a much bigger organization. So maybe, lots of people probably are already in touch with one of the Mantle brands. So if that's the case, then just reach out through that. But otherwise, hit us up directly on LinkedIn or email.
Amazing. And we'll include your LinkedIn links on the show notes. We'll also include your homepage. And Nat, Rich, thank you so much for taking the time this morning to share with us your perspectives and your experiences. It's been super, super useful and insightful to get to see what's happening in the data engineering space. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks, Felipe. It's been great.
Thanks for having us here.
Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. I hope that you got a lot out of this discussion. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe to the channel so more people can find out about the challenges that leaders have in the analytics and AI space. And that's what we're trying to share in Data Futurology. So please like and subscribe. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends. Thank you so much.